Hello, Monica,
Hi, Carolyn.
and good evening, everybody. Welcome to The Greatest Calling, Becoming a Game Changer. Now, before I turn this class over to Monica, I want to gush over her for a moment and just speak to the subject. Monica's usual audience is global and nations, and she has learned about game changing by changing the quality of lives for millions of people around the world. So it is a privilege to have her here and to have sculpted a course with her in which she took her vision of what it is to be a game changer and bring that vision down to inspiring every single person. And why I love the idea so much is because I've learned in my own work that essentially every one of us, no matter the size of our life, no matter the size of our arena, wants to feel like we can change something, that we are not helpless, that because where there's hope, there's power. And what does that mean to be able to empower yourself? And that's why we developed this course, to always know that power is something from within. And if we could only just know that, the quality of life for everybody would change. It wouldn't just be our game that would change, but everything. So I know that's the great ideal, but I don't have anything left in my life but to push the great ideal. So, my dear, wondrous new friend, I turn the class over to you, and I will see you at the end of it.
Thank you, Carolyn. Before you leave, let me just say, and I know you're there maybe, that thank you for inviting me.
Oh,
It's indeed a privilege for me. And I will begin and at least, talk about what you said right now. This work is not about how large my project is, how small it is, who I am, what my role in life is. It is about manifesting wherever I am, whatever I do,
mhm.
knowing that I make a difference and that I can be a game changer. I am
Right.
a game changer. Thank you,
That's,
Karen.
mwah. See you later.
See you. So, when Carolyn and I crafted this class, we sort of toyed with different ideas. And Carolyn said, you know what? Why don't we begin right at the heart of the matter? And as I say some things to you based on my life experience, I'm going to share stories of people around the world because Carolyn said my work is in the world, right? So I'll take you for a journey around the world. But let's begin with something that's universal. So in the UN, when we mean universal, when we say universal, what we mean is it applies to everyone everywhere. We use universal values, it applies to everyone everywhere. And so we said universal design. It applies to everyone everywhere. So, what is that? So, the essence of our work is also to demystify complex, complex ideologies, complex ways of looking at life, and simplify it in a way that we can all participate, not make it simplistic. So, to begin with, what I have learned from my life's work and from other scholars is that there are things that are innate in all of us. So the first learning I had actually was when I was in medical school. And a little after that, so I was taught in medical school, I studied in the late 60s and 70s, that the predictor for human effectiveness is your IQ. And the higher the IQ, the more successful you're going to be. And then Daniel Goleman, in his research on emotional intelligence, turned all that we learned upside down. And he said, no, 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 it's not IQ. The research shows that it is who I am, my self worth, my self esteem. In fact, he said self awareness is the single biggest predictor of effective leadership. And so we looked at what that meant. And today, whether we are looking at healing individuals with trauma, societies, whether we are looking at manifesting our full potential, we rest ourselves in this wonderful space of self-worth. That doesn't mean we don't have things that we are not perfect at. This is not about perfection. This is about being who I am, having a healthy sense of self. And when I take that to society, I use a word called dignity. And what it really means relationally is respect. And when I can hold myself and others with that essence of sense of self, there is something outstanding that emerges. Outstanding. So here's story number one. I'll take you to India. And I'm working in India with a woman called Hemlata, daughter of a construction worker. Anyone who's been in India knows that construction work in India is not like the US. Uh, it is really labor, and labor that is not often paid their wages the way it should be, not labor that can express themselves and unionize. Anyway, so I'm working, and she says, why don't we take this work to Himachal, where I know some people, and we are going to have Dalits from the the union, the Swaraj union, the people who work in Swaraj, it's to come. And I stand there and I go through, the exercises we do and touching who I am. And at the end of that first day, I broke down in tears because one young man stood up and said, for my whole life, I was untouchable. I was not allowed to sit in school with everyone else. I didn't eat on the same plate with everyone else, and not even share the food, not even drink this from the same glass. But today I know I'm as great as everyone else. That moment when there is pin drop silence and the best of a human emerges, that moment is the moment we want to touch. And I know there will be many people from India, the country I was born in, who will say, no, 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 caste really, like racism in the UAE, caste is really a yesterday matter. Oh, no, it's not. And if you want to disagree with me and you're from India, sure, go ahead. It's perfectly okay to disagree. David told me that this was not a UN session, so that I could say what I actually think and feel. And that's what Carolyn does. That's what Andrew does. We say and think what we feel. And yeah. So here it is. When I can touch that space, and I can touch that space of dignity. Fast forward, that was a union where there was no equipment for them. There were no gowns for them. There was nothing that would keep them safe. And they went and organized themselves to get what they needed to get and demanded it. So it's not just awakening. It's that awakening in action. And it's not about me. It's about the ability to have conversations that take us to that place. So dignity, vital. And then here comes the next story. The next story is out of children, with children, not out of children, with children, is our innate sense of fairness. So let's all of us go back to our childhood, and let's all of us go back to a time where we were celebrating. And then we have our favorite dish, let's say a cake or a chocolate cake. And then we are 12 people around the table, brothers, sisters, siblings, and mom and dad who made the cake. They make a very big slice for my brother or sister, and a very big slice for my cousin, which gives me a small slice. What am I going to say? Yeah, mom, I really understand that it's okay. No, I say, where's my share? And fast forward, Oxfam in 2015 had a brilliant report, even it up. And in that, they said 92% of Americans believe in fairness. But But fairness is the basis of equity. Fairness is the basis of justice. Fairness is the basis of our love. Because, like Cornel West says, and I wrote that quote because I love that quote, and he said something like, justice is what love looks like in public. That's love. Justice is love. And so, we have that innate sense of fairness. We have a sense of self-esteem and dignity. We have fairness, but something in the external world has shaped those qualities out of sync, innate aspects out of sync. And then there is another dimension. And the word that we use in Sanskrit is karuna, and the word in English is compassion. And somehow most of us feel compassion is this woo-woo soft space. No, no. Compassion is a very strong space. It's the space when I see suffering, I act. I'm just called to act. It's a space of calling that you and I have. As long as I don't cover myself with onions, layers and layers like an onion. Okay. So our design is the same worldwide. And that's what I found. And when Carolyn says it's millions of people, because the millions of people have the same design. Given a forum where we truly respect the innate power of people, truly respect and give space to the innate power of people, we can take it to its next step. And the next step is, how do these attributes manifest in the work that I do or you do? Whether that work is at home, it's in my workplace, or it's in society where I serve. It doesn't matter. So I'll take you to this, to this space in another way. So we've worked with a group of people, and we are working in Ethiopia, and there were many of us who worked together. Our UN officers led the process, and we worked with government, business, civil society. We had leadership coaches, and most of the design work for the technical dimensions were done by our people in the government and us, and we were addressing HIV and AIDS. And when we were addressing HIV and AIDS, HIV and AIDS in the early days was imbued with a sense of stigma and discrimination. And how do I transcend that space of stigma and discrimination? It's by touching this space of who I am in a way that I'm unique and yet one. Like Rumi says, you've come here to do something unique, and yet you are one with others. So Ethiopia. And we were working on this, and we said, okay, what really do you care about? What are the universal values that you stand for? What is it that's the essence of who you are? And yes, it's not a space that we really can give words to. In India, you have all these gods and goddesses, but actually what is meant is that each one of them is imbued with a certain energy, of love, of compassion, of justice, whatever. It's the same with a lot of the angels we talk about, or a lot of the saints we talk about, is there is an essence in them. That essence is there in you and me. And cultivating that essence is so vital. So we are working on this essence. And, when we look at our own values and what we care about, our compassionate heart breaks open. There is a burning for fairness, because that's just who we are. And it's an ability to see patterns. And this brings me to the next point. As humans, we all have a pattern mind. Donella Meadows, who did outstanding work on, and most people know, on really transformation and systems thinking, and wrote a primer. And she was perhaps one of the few people who said, systems thinking is not just about experts. Of course, we need PhDs in systems thought and all the algorithms they make and all the stuff that is done. And we've advanced due to the technologies that are there, whether it's software or hardware. But this pattern mind exists in humans. And there is something about us that we've made it an elite space because we've given only knowledge that kind of respect. But the pattern mind exists in all of us. A farmer knows when to plant, when not to plant. Parents around the world to take care of their children know as they grow, they can do different things. There are patterns of eating, of working together at different seasons. And it's possible that you and I look at stimulating that pattern mind, not substituting it with our theories, not pushing on our theories. So, how do we manifest this innate power that you and I have? It's by cultivating this space, the space of our compassion, of our innate sense of self-worth, so that we respect others. When we don't respect ourselves, how can we respect others? And then the sense that of our fairness. But this is the higher consciousness that you and I have. But we also have, a sense of fear. So when my personal power, which is the next piece that we can talk about, when my personal power needs to manifest, I need to look at the whole of me. So let's begin with the first part that we started, the universal attributes of humans. And then next, what are my inner capacities? Who am I? That inquiry is vital. Who am I? So that my answer is who I am is. Who am I? Now, this who can be asked in three ways, because we are also people who work and live in the world. Who am I as a father? Who am I as a mother? Who am I as a child? Then I have different roles. I could be a teacher. I could be an AI geek. I could play so many roles with different skills and different responsibilities. So who I am is that. I have a different kind of who am I? A different question that we often don't ask. What are those invisible patterns where I, because of who I am, want to intervene, want to be a game changer? Because I can see things are not working, but can I see the patterns behind it? And who am I when I see those patterns? So when we see patterns, we usually see them through the lenses of our education, the disciplines we studied, or our ideological stances, or our religious beliefs. I'm not saying they're correct or not correct. But what I'm saying is, and that's not the right word. What I want to say is some of those beliefs are life enhancing and some of them are life diminishing. So it's not about right and wrong, really. It's about, is it life enhancing? Is it life diminishing? Do I ask myself that question? Who am I in this mess as a game changer? Who am I as a game changer? Because the rules of the game are invisible. Am I willing to stimulate my pattern mind to see those rules? Then who am I as the essence, as a gift for this planet? Who am I? So these are almost different aspects of who I am. Who I am as roles I play. Who am I as a game changer? Who am I as the essence of our oneness? Because the energies may have a different sort of description, but they are all in essence about this place of where there is no each and other. Like Rumi says, come meet me in that field where there is no each and other. And then here comes a story from Ethiopia. So we've opened this door, and sometimes we just open it a little bit. But many people depending on where they are in their life's journey, how willing they are to inquire and not be attached to their opinions, but to alter them. And so here is this woman, and she's an Ethiopian. And in Ethiopia, during HIV and AIDS, like in many parts of Africa, a lot of the property was taken back by the man's family because they paid bride price, even though the law has changed. It's the opposite of a heinous practice in India called dowry. And we keep saying dowry is a gift. No, dowry is not a gift. Dowry is pressure of really of a very diminishing space. In my view, I'm not asking you to agree. And so, anyway, she stands up the next day and she says, I said that the essence of who I am is manifesting equality everywhere, at home, in my workplace, in my community. And then I reflected what happened. We took away our sister in law's property because that's the cultural norm. That's how it's done. And then she said, but it's not okay because that's not fairness. And she said, I told my husband it's not okay. We called her up, and by the end of this week, we are returning everything. Do you think everyone was clapping for her? Absolutely not. Some others stood up and said, well, but isn't that our culture? We still take care of them, don't we? We call them over and we take care of them, don't we? She said, no. If I don't change what's a cultural norm that's life diminishing, who will? But to have people inquire so that the answer that lies within them is manifest in itself is an art and a science. And that's the beginning of this journey. My inner capacity is manifesting. There's another dimension that Carolyn and I spoke of, and we spoke of asking ourselves, we know there is this greatness in human beings, but what's in us that stops us? What are we really afraid of? What are our fears? So there are some fears we have worldwide. I've worked worldwide. And I want to distinguish the space of fears from real life threats. For example, if there is a situation of war, there's a real life threat. If there's violence at home, there's a real life threat. If children are hazed in school or ragged in school or ridiculed, that's a real life threat for them. That's not to be just, pushed away and said, oh, you'd have to deal with it. So when I'm going to be beat up, I know in the evening, then it's a real life threat. I need to have ways to deal with it. But there are some socialized fears we have. And I'll begin with mine. And when you discover your socialized fear, here is what happens. In the beginning, you say, oh my God, how come my children knew about it? So my biggest fear is abandonment. If I do something, people will leave me. And somehow everybody near you knows that. So they push that button so that they can have their way and not yours. Or that we can't co-create something. And so now it's very hard for them to push that button, but they're looking for other buttons. Other things like our fear of failure. So we don't take a risk. Our fear of making mistakes. I mean, who doesn't make a mistake? The only person who doesn't make a mistake is the one who's not in action, which is why we don't want to be in action just in case we make a mistake. Or our fear of being ridiculed, our fear of being judged. So the day I know that these are the buttons that push me, I can actually have a sense of humor with them. I can have a way of looking at them like, oh, that's me. That's how I grew up. And I have a choice because you know what? In consciousness, whatever I give attention to will grow. You give attention to this wonderful space that is deep within you, what you care about, and you can notice, name, and see when you're triggered, you can move. More than triggered, I would say when you notice your fear, right? because this is mindfulness in action. Someone said our work is mindfulness in action. Yes. Mindfulness is the ability to notice something without judgment, to notice it, to name it, and to let go. And so much beautiful work has been done on mindfulness, like John Kabat-Zinn saying. And and I think I want to go back to what Carolyn said. Our purpose is to generate hope for action. So, can mindfulness then become a space of action based on dignity, equity, compassion? So, there's one thing we face whenever we work around the world, that there is a confusion between cultural norms and universal values. There's a huge confusion. Actually, that confusion exists in many parts. And I'll share a couple of stories around the confusion that exists. So, one of the confusions that exist with the word values is that we look at it as what we think is important. So, in common parlance, I say, I value my time. So, in English, we use the word values in at least 6 ways. So, one of them is that, what do I really value? Like, I value my time, I value my walk that I go for, or I value my car, or whatever it is. I give importance to. But when I work in the world of the business, the word that they use is value chain. And what they mean, and I am saying values, universal values of dignity, equity, and compassion, what they are hearing is the value of the value chain of a product. That means how much money do we make, or how much do we have to invest in the different processes. And then I go to different societies. And it's Harvard that did a study long ago that said that in most cultures, people are so attached to their cultural norms that they call it values. And when we break that cultural norm, people get very upset because they say they are our values. And it's vital that I'm able to distinguish this in my home, in my workplace, and in the community. So I'll give you a story out of the work that we were doing in the National Park Services, Kirsten Gallo and I. And we were working in Alaska. And one of the heads of offices was an Inuit. And she said, one of my biggest issues is the lower 48, that means the other states of the US, do not understand our values. And at that time, I didn't say anything. And then during lunch break, I asked her, I said, what do you mean when you use the word values? She said, we have 17 values. I said, okay, let's begin. She said, our first value is that when there is a terrible storm, anything like that, we must take care of our young, which means we care for the vulnerable. Yeah, that is something universally applicable. Caring, caring for those who need it. I said, then what's your second value? He said, our second value is that, whenever there's that terrible, very bad storm, we take care of the elderly. Sure, that's universally applicable. Then she said that, our third value is a kind of reverence for life. And I said, what do you mean? She said, we eat meat, we kill a seal, but we don't just kill it and then we go to the restaurants and say, do you want your steak medium rare, or whatever? She said, that's very strange because we actually thank the seal for giving up life. We give it water and we kill it with the least amount of pain because the seal has given up the seal's life for us. So I said, okay, that's like really honoring sentient beings. I get it. She said, our fourth value is our oldest son has to be a great hunter because they hunt to eat. So I said, you know what? If you came to parts of India where they are vegetarian and they don't eat meat, do you think that they will train their son to be an excellent hunter? She said, no, 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 no. Of course not. Of course not. So I said, that's a norm. Something that's not universally based on deep values is a norm. So in this work, there are cultural norms that are life enhancing. The songs that we sing around the world, like Happy, There are cultural norms like wearing jeans so that we don't have to all go in a fancy clothes that tell our fellow students what kind of elite family we come from. So there are many things that are leveling and are life enhancing and are fun. Foods that we have from all over the world. So there are many life enhancing practices in each culture. In India, Annaprasan, giving a baby, weaning a baby at the age age of 5 months, giving some solid food is a great thing. But there are also, practices that are neutral. It doesn't matter, and every culture has them. But there are practices that are life diminishing. Hate mail called freedom is in that category. So any life diminishing space that's a cultural norm, we need to be able to question. Casteism is based on cultural norms. Racism is based on cultural norms. So then, do we have the courage to inquire? And that brings us to transcending our fears. So, transcending fears that are not like real life threats, or they are not related to a mental illness I may have, or it's not a phobia, but it's actually a socialized fear that comes up like the default in a phone. Every morning when I put on my phone, a certain picture comes up. It's like that. So our survival brain wakes up, and it looks for threats where there are no threats. And so, how do I look at that from a different lens? How can I notice, name it playfully, mindfully, and transcend it, anchoring myself in who I am? And that is a very peaceful place. And it's not peaceful in the sense like there's no joy and fun and adventure. It's an adventurous place, it's a space of discovery. So, in our cultures, we have this confusion between a cultural norm and a universal value. We have another confusion in words. So words actually, in any culture, show how we think. And one of the things that stops us from manifesting who we are is fear. And then there is another word called bravery. So, bravery and courage are two different spaces in the work we do. So, courage is from that Latin word cur, heart, a broken heart. When I break open my heart, I am compassionate. I'm called to act. And when I break open my heart, something unique emerges. And that is courage. And I'll tell you a story right now from Europe, another one, because stories illustrate the power of people. And anyway, bravery, however, comes from a daring. And, and we need to differentiate, or distinguish is a better word, distinguish between courage that leads to creative commitment, action, change, transformation, and bravery that is a socialized process. And for example, veterans who work around, we have a process of training people who fight in the armies and all over the world. So they are brave, and there's a particular social process. And we consider that to be fine. It's defined socially. I'm brave. I'm brave when I do some daring acts. And some of them are born from compassion and some from just how I've been trained. But there are also acts, for example, when there is gang warfare and war, then if one member of my gang is killed, then my gang will go and kill somebody in the other gang. That's part of a culturally defined word, brave. I need to be brave. So very vital that I'm able to distinguish courage, which is not the absence of that feeling of fear, which our body tells us, from bravery. So courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, right? It's the ability to act in spite of that fear, despite that fear. So here is a story. So Andre Nosbok is from the Balkans, and my colleague Paula was working there. And he was one of the youth. He was a Serb. He was one of the youth who established work on human rights. He was one of the youth that when there was the tribunal and he had to testify about what was horrendous killing, he decided he needed to speak truth. And his neighbors threatened to kill him. His mother stood by him. So when he came to the UN, I asked him, where did this come from, Andre? He said, I was afraid the whole night, but I knew I couldn't live with myself. He said, but it started way back far, when I was young. I was in eighth grade. And I came home from school one day and I said to my mom, I said, there's this guy from Latvia. He cannot speak the way we speak. And all of us are making fun of him. It's so ridiculous. And my mother said to me, Andre, how would you feel if you went to the US and you spoke English and they all made fun of you? He said, somehow she didn't say I was bad or wrong. She just asked me to inquire, how would you feel? He said, I actually didn't sleep that night. And I went the next morning. I was quite a class leader. And I told all the boys, we are going to stop this hazing. We're going to stop this bullying. In the beginning, my best friend said I was a sissy. They made fun of me. I said, no way. This is what's going to happen. This is being strong. It's not okay. Fast forward, it's the same feeling. So stories at home, the way we bring up our children matter so much. How we ask them to inquire so that they get an insight that stands behind them through life is what makes the difference. So it's our conversations at home, locally, that make that difference globally that Andre made. And then we come to this place, okay, I realize we are all the same. We have a universal, and yet we are totally different. I know who I am. Deep within me, I know who I am as a game changer, what I will shift. A game changer shifts invisible patterns that are life diminishing. And we will work more on that the next few sessions. And then I look at, what is this fear? My socialized fear. How do I notice and name it mindfully? And how can I transcend it? And how can I open the door for inquiry? So I come to this place where I come to this understanding that really what I do matters. Because what Andre's mother did mattered. It mattered in a very, very beautiful way. And so I don't know whether it mattered for life, because I've often wondered when we work on large scale change, it's 5 steps forward and then it's 2 steps back. But I must share a story with you on making a difference. So I was on a train from New York to Philadelphia to work with a group of people in business who wanted to work on, the kind of work Carolyn does and I do. And an elderly lady came and she said, may I sit near you? I said, of course, the seat is free. She said, no, in this country, we need to ask because not everyone wants to sit near older people. And then we started chatting. Her name was Irene Goldman. And she said her husband, when he was alive, invented the first time release capsule in pharmaceutical industry. And she was so proud. And then she said, this was 2001. She said in 1955, because she was 90 plus when she was talking to me, I was very disturbed with the Korean War. And I organized women saying that if our children play can play in peace, children all over the world must play in peace, and that we must stop war. So she said, I organized people. And then one day I decided with Paul Robeson to go in 1955 to meet Dag Hammarskjöld in the UN. And I told him, we have to stop the war. I said, why don't you come over, Irene, and we go to the UN today? So I invited her to lunch, and she came and she said, oh my God, this is horrible. You have so many security gates. We didn't have any security gates in our days. We just went wherever we wanted. We had access to everybody. Everything is barricaded today. And she later sent me a thank you with a little Paul Robeson stamp. And why did I bring up Paul Robeson? In 1955, I was very young, was 5 years old, and my brother had passed away, and my mother was grieving. And my father bought from the store a wind-up gramophone. So he bought some records. And those records, one of them was a record from Paul Robeson. And he told me, I couldn't quite understand. He said, Paul Robeson is from another country. It's called the US. And over there are some people who have a lot of privilege, and there are others who suffer. And he's singing about that. And in our country, there are many of us who have a lot of privilege, but there are many, many people, and we call it caste, and they have not the same privilege. And I thought to myself, much later, listening to Irene, I gave my father that stamp, and I said, Dad, you made such a difference to me that day. And to me, how many of us have those conversations? So I think now I will start sort of sharing a couple of things about what I can do and what you can do. I mean, what do I need to change in my life, really? Because it's an inquiry. This work is based on inquiry that leads to not questioning. So there's a difference between a question to understand, a reason, to get a reason, a why. Why does this happen? So that's a question. There are, of course, questions of doubt as well. But there is a question I ask myself, which is a deeper why. A deeper why. And a deeper why because it really matters to me. A deeper why because truly each one of us can make a difference. Because today's world of connectivity, each of us can make a difference in a way we couldn't before. So this work is about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. By what do I mean by ordinary? I mean, I am not Nelson Mandela and I'm not, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but I am Rosa Parks. I am the person whose actions make a difference every single day. Like that one Dalit man who stood up. And then there was pin drop silence for 5 minutes because everybody in the room, they all were part of the sanitation space in India and sanitation professional in India. And when he could stand up and say that, something happened to everybody in that room. When this woman from Ethiopia stood up and said what she said, something shifted for everybody in that room. So the ability, like Rilke says, there is always that one man who will stand up and nobody knows who he is. He says it very eloquently. And this future speaks ruthlessly through him. I don't mean man like only men, women, and people of all genders. So inquiry, this is a deep inquiry. Who do I need to be a game changer? Beyond ideologies, beyond rules, beyond beliefs, beyond the perspectives I'm attached to, the opinions I'm attached to. Who do I need to be? Who do I need to be? So there are a few distinctions in this space that are very important in the work we've done. So when I want to work for change, one of the things that happens is that I have a cause. Let's say my cause is to end homelessness. There's nothing wrong with that cause. It's a very lofty cause. Or to end slavery, or to end casteism. It's a very valuable cause. But when my identity, my ego gets wound up with that cause, I'm like a zealot. I am obsessed. This is not about being a zealot. This is not about being obsessed. This is about manifesting change from who I am in a way that I manifest my oneness with others. And it's possible. It's not a theoretical space. But I need to know, am I so attached to my cause that I cannot see the other? And when there was work being done with activists, 99% and 1%, and I said this work is about both. It's if I cannot see the greatness in the 1%, the relationships in society are not going to change. This is not about poor against the rich or rich against the poor. It is about being able to create platforms for inquiry in both sides, recognizing that society has oppressed certain categories of people through norms, through whatever. So do I distinguish between being obsessive as I inquire and working for a cause? But am I obsessed, or am I working out of an innate sense of compassionate justice and dignity for all? So that's an inquiry. The second inquiry is related to breaking open my heart. Many people ask me, so I have been working with them, I've given them data, and they're not convinced. I have given them all the arguments about why there is really climate change, and they say there's no climate change. And so the issue is, it's not about convincing. It's about breaking open one's heart of universal love. So we distinguish the word love is also of many kinds, no? Love can be possessive. This is mine, I love my car. This is my baby, I don't love other babies, only my baby. So is this me, my? And it can be that kind of love. It can be the love of possession. It can be the love of romance. And yes, of course, we must have romance. And that's how we keep going, right? And but there is another kind of profound universal love, which is sometimes almost painful. And painful because it breaks open a space that is beautiful, beautiful. And so I'll connect two stories here, one from the US and then one, and actually connected to India. So many of you may know Adam Buckle, and he shared a story when Andrew and I were listening to some conversation he was having in New York. And he said, I was going to India, I think he said 19, and I was going to an ashram and seeking, the spiritual space. So anyone who knows India knows it's the best and the worst of the planet, meaning there are hideous things that happen. Anyway, someone told him everyone in India is not a sage. You may be robbed. So he says, I go and this to Delhi airport, and a jeep comes to pick me up, and I go towards this ashram, and this driver is taking me somewhere else. And I said, oh God, maybe I'm being robbed. And then he said, I go to the ashram, and it's one huge room. and everyone who's there is near death. And most of us, and definitely in the culture I am speaking in, the US, death is, with many people, considered a failure, and we must keep living, just keep living. And so he says, the smell of death is not familiar to many people. He said, the ashram guru asked me, where do you want to sleep? Do you want to sleep here with everyone, or do you want to go up to the roof? He said, I love nature. I love nature. I want to sleep on the roof, under the stars, near the mango tree. And so he goes up, and there's a hailstorm. And the hailstorm is so much that he can't be there. And he comes down. And what these men have noticed, that he actually was a little taken aback being with them, but they cleaned up the room, and they gave him fresh bedding that was from somewhere, that had been washed and kept aside. They huddled into one corner so that he would not have to be near them. And when he saw them do this, and for that moment, he said, I pushed them away, and they are holding me with love. He said, I broke down and cried for 14 days. I don't know why I cried, but I just cried. So ask yourself, when did you break open your heart? Because in that moment, we act differently. So one of my colleagues, Shomita, she and her colleague were serving in the rural areas in India, and the head of a bank came to see the project on financial literacy. And instead of the usual 5-star reception that we have, whether it's in the US or India or anywhere else, when we raise money, etc., or the 250 private jets that went to Davos to talk about poverty, we have some practices maybe we can reconsider. Anyway, uh, she said that, she and her friend said, we'll take him to eat in a hut, the furthest hut. And his deputy said, no, he can't walk in the sun. It's too hot. It's too far. But they asked him, and he said yes. He sat on the floor, and the first thing he did was to weep. Do you know how to create spaces where people actually touch their heart? And he said, I joined banking to serve. I don't know where I've come. So even to ask that question, where have I come? I will go back home and alter policies. And that's what has happened with many. So the first, to distinguish obsession and being a zealot from one of service, with passion, with urgency, and then breaking open a heart of love, of universal love. And then to be able to connect who I am with the purpose of my life, and then with the contribution I make from that purpose. And that purpose shifts as we deepen our inquiry. But when I act from that space, I'm attuned within, I'm in tune with myself. And when I'm in tune with myself, my work is joy. It is not a job. So we just substitute the letter B for Y. So to move beyond doing a job, to be able to serve with joy is very simple. It's not about doing a different job, it's about doing the same job differently. And to me, that is very vital. So to me, I think I would like to start a conversation with you, Carolyn. And, you know, I've talked so much.
Oh no, you talked beautifully. I took so many notes that were so inspiring. You were so inspiring. And I wanted to start by saying that what you were describing so beautifully is, I think, a lesson that I've many times communicated in my own way, which is that I deeply believe that for all the ways we could describe life, for me, it is the journey between the love of power and the power of love. And that is essentially the journey of life. And we're all on that journey. And even the choice to empower ourselves, even the choice to empower ourselves is a part that takes place on that journey. It takes place on that journey. And that I think that what you're describing as like when someone says, what qualifies as action, which was a question you asked early on in your presentation this evening. And you know what occurred to me, Monica? That the more empowered someone is, the more someone understands the power of love versus having the illusion that something loud, big, and expensive is powerful. That
Mhm.
as you become a more empowered person, you get that loud, big, and expensive is the illusion. That real acts of power are rooted in activating your values, in acting upon your values, in acting to empower others. Because what you're actually doing is you are empowering human beings on the grid of life. And that's the game changer. And that no matter how, where you do that, where you plug into the grid of life, whether you're in the grocery store or in your backyard gardening or wherever you plug in through another person, that you're plugging in through another person, heart to heart, and that activates the grid in a way that all big, loud, and expensive cannot do. Because all that can do is make noise in the neighborhood. But invisible acts of power that really come from the soul, when you actually get that it's the invisible world that empowers this world. Whether you get that it's the, if I said, bring me all the most valuable things that you have and all the most valuable things that have happened to you, they would be acts of love. And I would say, what do those acts of love look like? They don't look like anything, but all your acts of love, all the acts of compassion, all the acts of kindness, all the intellectual gifts, they're out here. They don't look like anything, but those are the invisible forces that have given you a reason to live and have given you a reason to motivate others and have, this is what we plug into the grid of life and give to others. Yes?
Absolutely. There are a couple of things that you've said, Carolyn, that are vital, and we need to hold it with the energy that you are holding it. When we use the word my values, what people start saying is almost like I have a couple of adjectives to describe that space. The first word I use is universal, which means that
Mhm.
it I don't have that value for only those I love. I have that for everyone. Now it sounds very philosophical and it sounds very, but
Uh,
I'll share an incident. And the incident happened after the Rwandan genocide. And in the UN there was a brilliant officer, and he was from Rwanda, and his family had been killed in the genocide, and he was still serving. And the person who was organizing the refugee camp uh, said, you know what, I would like you to head this camp. And he said, no, I am a Hutu, and the Tutsis killed my family. I cannot take care of them. I just can't. I have the image of everyone in front of me. And the supervisor was a mature person. He said, you know what? I'm going to hold this post vacant for 2 months. come back and see me in 2 months.
Mhm.
And in 2 months, he came and said, I will serve. That's a very difficult space. It's a hard space.
Yes.
And it's a space like when the terrorist attack in Mumbai took place, and the head of the hotel, his wife and children were killed.
Mhm.
He saw that, and he continued to serve the rest of the staff.
Mm.
And so for me, this love that we speak of, it is a profound, strong space of true oneness. And it doesn't always have to be this way. It can be in a very meaningful, simple way. And they did a piece on the strength of love, in a way, the way you use love,
Mhm.
love that builds resilience,
Mhm.
and the love that builds my capacity to share my greatness,
Mhm.
my
Mhm.
love for everyone. And they studied children in war-torn spaces, and they said, how come some children thrive and a few thrive and most don't? What's in it that the children who thrive, well, what are those characteristics? And they came up with five. And the five characteristics of those children were that each one of them had one trusted adult they could go to,
Mm.
that in their home there was no abuse of substance abuse or abuse, that they played a lot. It was not that they studied a lot, they played, that they took care of things beyond themselves,
Mhm.
not just my dog, but all dogs, like just
Mhm.
caring for
Yeah. They
animals.
became, they
And
became
then,
immediately
yeah,
family.
yeah.
Mhm.
And then the last thing that surprised me is that the family really anchored themselves in a kind of spirituality, but not in religiosity or ritual, or that very austere, you know.
Fundamentalism, no fundamentalism, just
Exactly, exactly.
celebration of life, just
Yes,
goodness, that there
yes,
was a higher goodness.
yes. And so for me, these five have stayed with me a long time. And yes, it is our playfulness, our joy, our
Mhm.
ability to have fun. So it's not a morbid space. It's actually a very life enhancing space.
So, if assuming all these people are listening to us, and we would say, where does someone begin on their own path to think, I'd like to know how to initiate becoming a game changer in my life? What is the first things our instructions to them?
The
Our,
first thing I would say is find out what you care about deeply, and find that out in two ways.
Mhm.
You know, ask yourself, when I admire, let's say, someone you don't know, but maybe Thich Nhat Hanh, what kind of quality do I admire in him? Because in psychology, what I see out there is me. What I hate out there is my shadow. But we are not doing any shadow work, right? So
Mhm.
I get to know myself in a deeper way, and the essence of who I am, the poetry of my life, that baseline. That is step one.
Mhm.
And to be able to articulate that, to
Mhm.
be able to make that the foundational anchor. It's almost like, that yoga pose, Carolyn, when the warrior pose, you anchor yourself with one foot and stretch with the other. So
Mhm.
that anchor of that foot
Mhm.
is in who I am. And that's why can see myself in this work. That would be step one.
Mhm.
Step two would be to activate my pattern mind in this complex world. So I asked the scientists, climate change is so complex. How do you put everything together? There's so much evidence. He said, learn to connect the dots. So we
Mm.
do have a systems mind.
Mhm.
Are we willing to connect the dots openly, or do we want to connect the dots to retrofit my own theory of life? That means I'm willing to let go. I'm willing to open up, and I'm willing to activate my pattern mind that then can see the invisible patterns.
Mhm.
Very vital, very vital. And that's the piece we avoid. Because, you and I spoke about this, Carol. Most of us who speak about deep consciousness add to it, well, let's have some action. Of course, that's a good thing. I mean, some action, a scatter of wonderful ideas.
Mhm.
But most of them do not ask the absolute vital question: what needs to shift in my culture for
Mhm.
everyone to live with dignity?
Mhm.
What needs to shift in the system where we have enough food to feed twice the number of people on the planet that we have today, and yet 1 billion people go to bed hungry, and 22,000 people die of lack of food on the planet today.
But if we took that and applied it to the individual, what needs to shift in my thinking? What
So,
needs
in my
in
thinking,
my thinking? What needs to shift? How do I need to shift in my, because what is in the micro becomes the macro.
so we are going to unfold details on this one question in our next few sessions, Carolyn. But the summary statement is: I am also Andre's mother. How I speak at home, what I do and how I interpret at home, how I am able to relate to setbacks at home matters to the world, not
Yes.
just me.
Precisely, because what is in one is in the whole. Yes.
Yes, yes. And how, so today, um, let's take an example of what happened in India, for example, or in this country, in the US. And I say that because, I'm born in India and I live in the US and you're in the US. What happened when COVID hit? We started looking up for whom to blame,
Mm,
whom to blame.
mhm.
So we blame the migrant labor, or we blame Muslims, or we blame somebody else, and we blame the scientists, and we blame, depending on the country, we blame different people. Instead of sitting back and saying, we have a crisis, what can we do that is life enhancing to others? So I was working in Norway at that time. And one of the young colleagues said, we have a wonderful word in our culture. It's called dugnad. And I believe the head of state said to the youth, when COVID broke out and then they were not, said, I know you're giving up something. You will not be able to celebrate graduation from school or college and have fun with your friends like every other batch did. But remember, we are a culture that believes in dugnad, which is, I will do whatever is great for me, provided it doesn't harm anybody else.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, cultural conversations,
Mhm.
reinterpreting social narratives, being able to listen for the commitment for action behind complaints and changing that narrative. These are all everyday things we can do instead of igniting fear and separative conversations.
Absolutely. If there's one jewel that I would love to give people so that they could activate it in their pocket, and they could just pull it out and turn it on and activate it whenever they needed it. It would be the jewel where they understood how powerful every single thing that they thought and everything that they saw and how they interpreted at what incredible power they had within themselves and how they in constructing anything from within themselves, how much power that has on the outside. So that by doing anything, like deciding to see things differently, like I think I'm going to start thinking in terms of how my actions impact the whole. And I may not
Exactly.
see that. I won't see any of the consequences of that. I won't any more than you can see your karma. any more than you can see your dharma, any more than you can see an act of love, that whatever. But I'm going to start getting that this is a bio-spiritual, ecological theology that we are living. It is a bio-spiritual ecology, that what is in one is in the whole, that I'm a micro earth to the macro earth, that is how I'm going to start living, that how the population of my micro, how I treat the population of my micro earth will be reflected on the macro earth. I'm a molecule of this earth. That by shifting this perspective, that alone shifts. You cannot relate to one thing in your world in the same way.
Absolutely. And imagine I've taken this out of the pocket and activated it.
Mm-hmm.
So the word we often use is fractal, that a fractal is a pattern that repeats itself.
Right.
So when I can see that what I do, how I think, and who I am, that fractal, what I do, how I think, and who I am, when I am manifesting life that way, I'm actually part of a global social movement.
Mm-hmm. Precisely.
And that I don't have to do it the way it was done before.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, nature is full of fractals, a fern leaf. And we'll do a little more we will go into some more depth if you want, Carolyn, on that. But
Yes.
this is so powerful. The day I recognize that I am what the world is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. I know exactly what you're talking about. I had an experience quite some time ago now, actually, but uh, my life shifted so much from my work as a medical intuitive and doing sacred contracts and doing medical intuitive readings to deeper, what I would call more mystical experiences, deeply personal inner experiences. And one day, and a mystical experience for me is just one of these micro, tiny events that happen in the blink of an eye, and yet they change you for the rest of your life for always, right?
Yeah.
And I was in the back in my backyard, and it was stunning. It was one of those gorgeous, perfect summer afternoons, and all of a sudden, just like this, and just for a microsecond, I could feel that I could hear and feel every single thing in my garden breathing, and I could feel its consciousness. I could hear the trees and feel the trees and the flowers and everything all at once. Everything all at once. It was as if I had melted out of my body, and it wasn't just in my garden. All of a sudden it was bigger than my garden, and I just kept going. And I experienced a tiny, I can't even describe it. It was like Teresa of Avila would say, I want to describe it. My brain is incapable. I don't have the words. I went past vocabulary able, right? And then I came back, and then I was squeezed back into my body, like, and back into physical form, right? But nothing's been the same. Not
Mhm.
I actually say to my garden every day, "Hi, hello, everybody," and I have this deep, passionate love because I know how alive they are. But it's not just that. I know, I know. I don't believe, I don't think about. I know how all life breathes together. How the earth is the largest living creature we will ever know, and we stand on it we stand on Mother Earth all the time, and no one realizes, nobody thinks about, hi, good morning, I mean, it's just
Yeah.
this masterful, wondrous universe. And um, I realized that years ago, and I could not have contained that experience, Monica. That experiences of becoming able to think in terms of the whole, able to consider the whole, and not just, but really act as a molecule of all life, where you actually do consider all life, where it's actually now a resident at your dinner table. I sit at my table, and so does the community of life, because I make food with the notion of what sustenance and sustaining and doing things right. And so all humanity is sitting at my dinner table, and how I do my garden, and how I try to include humanity in my life, in my work, in my teaching. But there was a time when that would have been the most preposterous idea to me, when I was far more in my narcissistic little, but that now that doesn't make any sense to me anymore. Just thinking about myself, it just doesn't make any sense. It's such an empty path for me. So getting people over to that bridge where they get that the larger your heart, the the more the universe speaks to you, the more the universe says, aha, a friend, an ally, we can speak to that human. There's a human being we can talk to. That's, to me, the most incredible gift we can give people.
Right. And Ca- Carolyn, you talked about the heart. So the heart expands as we give,
Mm,
and as we give, knowing that there is someone to receive. And the person who benefits the most from the work I do, or the work you do, is you, Carolyn, and me with the work I do, because it expands my heart.
mm.
And when it expands my heart, then I live with this sense of perfect unison, right? So there is something that not only can you and I um, talk about this space, that's been your mystical experience, that the mystery of life exists in every single thing we see and do,
Monica,
literally.
there may come a time in my life that I will write a book on like this causes of depression and anxiety, and this from a mystical point of view. And I will include in that a chapter of the price you pay for not being of service to others,
Hmm.
and of not thinking enough about others, about not doing enough for others. And that often that causes depression and anxiety. That too much focus on yourself causes you to implode, which is
It's wonderful you say this. And what, yeah, so again, story time. So I'm working at the UN, and about 30, well established consultants come and say, we want to serve in the small islands. And I say, of course. And then we are strategizing. And one of them says, please, can I come and have lunch with my partner? And with you, I have something very important. So they come. They are extremely wealthy. He has a big farm with every animal that you can think of, from llamas to goats to all kinds of things. And he and his partner come and say, we have a 20-year-old daughter, and she's depressed, and she loves animals. So we've got all the animals we could think of, including llamas, in that farm. But she's still on medication, and she's not doing well. So I asked the woman, I said, when did you have a moment in your life where you felt at total peace with yourself, and everything else was like nothing logic, nothing to. He says, when I went and served in hospice. Because when you serve in hospice, there's nobody you're pleasing, there's no agenda, there's just service. So I said, why don't you send your daughter to hospice to serve? They came back with chocolates in class 6 months later. Carolyn, I'm not misrepresenting. She said the child, the daughter is off medication. She has already started, shaping and eating well and everything. And she's no longer depressive. When I serve selflessly, something happens.
It's exactly right.
And I'm not imploding. It's not me, myself, and I.
Right. The last thing you can do is afford to constantly focus on yourself, me, myself, and I, which is one of the great gifts of going toward the power of love instead of the love of power. You get out of yourself, which is your most dangerous companion.
Yes. I have a colleague, Sudarshan, who said, like our triple personality disorder is me, myself, and I. Yeah.
I love it. What are we doing in the next class when we meet for session 2?
Oh, in the next class, just let me
It's
see.
realizing our full potential.
Yes. So we're going to make this, as you and I talked about, a practical thing that people can take home and do something with. And so I think that there is much to ponder today, such as who am I as a game changer? Beyond my ideological stances, how do I break open my heart and get out of the way of myself?
Right,
Now, what
right,
do I deeply care about?
right, right,
What cultural norms do you think I would like to shift? Where do
right.
I want to engage?
And that every single choice in your life where you actually decide, I'm going to challenge this or challenge that, is actually making a difference at the whole level.
Yes.
So the first class is inspiration, the second is perspiration, as they say.
And challenge is not us versus them. Challenge is
Right.
transcending what's not working.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, my darling, for a wonderful first class.
Thank you too, Carolyn, for inviting me and sharing our thoughts together.
Wonderful. And thank you, everybody. We'll see you for session 2 in 2 days.